de 5, 4 o 5.
Fantástico. ¿Podemos hablar en español en un podcast?
Sí, hacemos el programa así. Porque yo viví por un año en Argentina y antes de 83, en 78, estuve en Honduras y Guatemala.
Oh, muy interesante.
Yeah, so
Yo
I
fui
can...
a Argentina para un mes, un año ayer. Pero
Buenos
solo
Aires?
porque sí.
Buenos Aires?
Sí, más, what do you say, like mainly? Principalmente, sí.
Sí, principalmente.
Pero yo quiero visitar Chile, en todos diferentes países. Me gusta mucho Paraguay. Un poco menor.
¿Verdad? Oh.
Sí. No, es diferente. Sí, entonces,
Okay.
aloha, or hello, everybody. That was a little bit of fun speaking in Spanish since we said adelante and off we go. But anyway, I'm delighted to be joined by Larry Johnson, ex-CIA analyst and expert on many things foreign policy and seemingly what the hell Trump is doing in the Strait of Hormuz. Larry very kindly jumped straight on here after being on a colleague of mine's stream. So we're going to try and diversify a little bit. I don't want to bore you to death with the same questions, Larry, but there might be a little bit of overlap. So, I mean, the situation right now, as of, I think, the past few 5 minutes, Trump has announced, they will be completely closing off the strait. I think more details are coming through, and I'll try to get some updates as we're streaming now about the extent to which the American Navy will be, controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But can you explain to me and viewers, what is Trump doing here? What is he attempting to achieve?
Yeah, I wish walking inside Trump's mind is like going into a haunted house with real ghosts, not the Hollywood type, but the actual demons running around. The man's losing it. Some would argue, I have seen the argument made, that this is actually a brilliant strategy on Trump's part to provoke Iran into closing down the Strait of Hormuz, shutting that off. So now there's only 2 countries in the world that really are major producers of liquid natural gas, Russia and the United States. And this is a way to really jack up the U.S. economy. I don't really think they thought that through. Because again, anyone that knows anything about the world of liquid natural gas, the contracts for those purchases are usually made 6 months in advance. So it's like, if what you're consuming now, you would have purchased 6 months ago, say in September or August. So, that market, I think, is not really properly understood. But if he's going to impose a blockade, now, think through the logic of this. We want the Strait of Hormuz open so that there can be free flow of commerce. Therefore, we're going to blockade it so that nothing can get in and out. The logic of that seems to escape me. And now, again, they're going to seize and stop the flow of Iranian oil, except 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago now, Trump and his Secretary of Treasury, Bessent, lifted all the sanctions on Iranian oil. Why? Because we need the supply in the globe, because if the supply contracts much more, the price of oil is going to shoot to $200 a barrel. So Trump's new plan is to reduce the amount of oil available to the world. So already, I have not looked at the futures market, but my guess would be that the oil futures are soaring back up into triple digits. The actual sell of current oil that's on board ships is like $140 a barrel. But the oil futures had dropped down into the high 90s. The thought that, peace is at hand, we're going to solve this. Then it gets to the bigger question. How are they going to enforce a blockade? With what ships? They dare not put their ships within, 700 miles of Iran's shore. So just do the math on it, that if Iran sends out 10 tankers, then for the United States. The United States just doesn't have that many ships in this Navy deployed right there to be able to enforce an effective blockade. This is just political theater. This is posturing. Because if they in fact get close enough to, if they get within 200 miles of Iran's shore, I think now Iran will blow them the hell out of the water.
But just on this point, though, because I saw quite an amusing image on X earlier, and I think it was from a Chinese like social media or some Weibo, something like that. And it was basically someone had drawn just a line. So you've got the Iranian toll, but now you've got the American toll as well. So they're going to toll the toll. I think this is part of the economic strategic genius of Trump. And I think emphasize to you, Larry, that it's no longer 4D chess. Trump's actually playing 5D.
Yeah,
40 years, so 2025. So,
yeah.
No, but I don't really understand. So, in your experience of working in the State Department, what kind of assets are we talking about to actually undertake a naval blockade that works? Because they don't. Historically, the British did it with the Germans in World War I, and that was tricky to maintain.
Well, they would need, so right now they've got two Marine, one's called a helicopter, landing helicopter assault ship, LHA. I think that's what the initials stand for. But basically, it looks like an aircraft carrier, except it's got helicopters on it and some vertical takeoff landing aircraft, both the F-35 and the the Raptor. But they're going to need those because one approach is you've got a ship that you want to stop, so you're going to do a helicopter assault. Except if I'm Iran, all I do, I load those ships up with surface-to-air missiles, shoulder-fired, put groups on it, and they get approached by the helicopter, shoot the helicopter down. All they have to do is shoot one or two down, and then the United States is going to back off. And depending on the flag of the ship, the ships that Iran is allowing to exit are carrying a Chinese flag, a Japanese flag vessel. The United States is then risking an attack on the sovereign ship of another country. It's risking an escalation of naval conflict, and the Chinese aren't going to sit back and take this. They're fed up with the United States, and they've actually seen now how weak the United States is, because they've recognized that here is Iran that now for day, let's see, 31, 32, and today, so 44 days. 44 days, Iran has stared down the United States, supposedly the most powerful military nation in the world. Stared them down and still inflicted some serious damage on the United States, despite Trump's claims about we've wiped out Iran. And if you wiped it out, then why do you have to do a blockade? You're in control, right? No, you're not in control. I mean, God, this is...
but if I can be devil's advocate on that point,
sure,
because people will argue that it's not about toe to toe, Iran will never win against the United States, and if America really wants to, it can pull out any stops to take on Iran. But I still feel like that's missing the point, because this is not a conventional war, and wars are not really fought in a conventional sense. Well, since the Second World War, we haven't really fought a conventional war. Every war that the US has fought has been against a non-nation state or asymmetrical guerrilla kind of warfare. So what is the Pentagon's, the DOD, whatever, DO war strategy here? Why do they think that this is sustainable?
I admire your youthful optimism in using the word strategy. They got to have a strategy. No, they don't. It's called making shit up as you go along. Improvising. It's like a bad jazz band. Okay, they just, we're going to improvise, but we're all playing out of tune. Okay, so it's not pleasant to listen to. The United States, in war, the question is, can you defend yourself or impose costs on the other side that the other side's not willing to pay? And that's exactly the situation we're in here. Could the United States, in theory, put together an army that could invade Iran and take control of Iran? Yes, in theory. But we'd be talking in the millions, between 3 to 5 million men. Now, when you start totaling up the cost of that, that's trillions of dollars right there. And it's nothing that you just do overnight. And the number of casualties that would be incurred in trying to navigate to get out physically into Iran, you'd have to go through Iraq, and Iraq's not a friendly place. Or you'd have to try to do an amphibious landing down in the Arabian Sea, and even then, it's not easy terrain to move north. We saw how much difficulty the U.S. Army had in Italy in World War II. You got to say, yeah, you can put that down in the theoretical category, but in terms of actual costs, there's nothing the United States could do, short of dropping nuclear bombs on Iran, that would so completely devastate it that Iran would plead for an end. It is, and this break that we've had for about a week now is actually, Iran is taking great advantage of it. The Chinese are providing very sophisticated additional air defense systems, and a variety of other both intelligence support from Russia and from China. So if when this kicks back off, probably tomorrow, you're going to see Iran's going to respond with more force than it had prior to this temporary ceasefire.
Again, okay, interesting. What can Iran do then? Because there's a lot of speculation about how many assets they have. The emphasis is that the government is in disarray, which I just don't agree with. They're obviously not in a favorable position. But one news report I saw suggested that Mojtaba, the new supreme leader, has lost a leg, but he's capable of giving orders. It's just he hasn't been seen in public. So media was maybe speculating or propagandizing that he's a vegetable, he can't think, and so it's actually the IRGC running the show. So, I mean, considering all that, what do you think the Iranians would do?
Well, the Iranians smartly have limited their public exposure now. They saw in the past that the public exposure led to assassinations, and that's why the West is trying to bait him. Come out so we can identify where you are, so we can kill you again, or try to kill you again. Iran is in, they're in a good position. Think of it. This is like, in the mixed martial arts, where they're a cage match, and the one fighter has got the other in a chokehold. That fighter doesn't have to do anything; just maintain the chokehold, and at some point, either the other fighter is going to stop breathing, or is going to tap out and say, "Stop, no more." Iran has a chokehold on the world by closing the Strait of Hormuz, and it's achieved a tremendous diplomatic lever that it is using now by those countries that need oil. India, instead of Iran, they could have really retaliated against India. They said, "Come on by, sure, you can get some oil," and they may not even charge them the Chinese cover charge. They'll let them in on the friend and family program. Japan is now coming forward to get oil from Iran. So Iran's playing this card smartly. And, the United States has got to figure out which game it's playing. Is the game, let's cut off the supply of oil to the world and drive prices through the roof? Okay, then let's attack the oil fields of Iran and shut those down. That will worsen the world's economic situation. And because it's the United States that's doing that, the United States will bear the blame, shoulder the blame for it. And so instead of Donald Trump building up support around the world, it's like he goes out of his way to see who he can alienate. His comments 2 weeks ago about Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, saying he's kissing my ass. MBS is not known to be a guy that likes to be ridiculed like that in public. And I'm sure he will remember that in future dealings with Donald Trump. So, Trump is literally unhinged as you watch the attacks he's unfolding here in the United States against people that were his staunchest supporters on social media. The Tucker Carlson's, Megyn Kelly's, Alex Jones, Candace Owens.
Well, that's why I think that this whole idea of some grand strategic plan, vision is not true, because you wouldn't burn so many bridges simultaneously unless it's all part of an even greater sort of treat them mean, keep them keen or something. Yeah. When the guy is losing his marbles on Twitter, crazy bastard, all that, again, you can use your sense of power as a leverage, or you could try to coerce behavioral change. It doesn't go along with what he's then trying to do with the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. But look, go ahead. Sorry.
Go for it. No, I have a question for you after your.
I was just going to say, look, I've seen, my firsthand witnessing over the course of my time in government, both when I was officially with government and then working as a contractor. So let's take a simple example. I joined the Central America branch in September of 1986. I just completed a year as a career trainee at CIA. This branch is one of the top producing branches at CIA because the war in El Salvador, the war with Nicaragua and the Contras, the wars in Guatemala, those were in the top 5 foreign policy priorities of then President Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And so we had 10 analysts in that. We had 2 analysts for Salvador, an economic analyst, Costa Rica analyst, Guatemala, Panama, and I was the Honduran analyst. Out of all of us, I was the only one that spoke Spanish, and I'd actually lived in Central America. None of the others had, okay? But here we're, it's a priority, but we got all these people that really don't know Latin America at all. Don't speak the language, don't know the culture. Jump ahead to, it's March of 2003. We started the invasion of Iraq. And I have lunch with a guy named L. Paul Bremer, a.k.a. Jerry Bremer. Bremer was named at the end of March, like 1st of May, I guess, to become sort of the proconsul of Baghdad. He was going to be in charge of running the whole government and everything. Now, I knew Jerry he had been the coordinator for counterterrorism, and he had left that job when I joined that office, and he was succeeded by a guy named Morris Busby. But Jerry and I were friends. We had just had lunch when this announcement came. And so here's Jerry, who has zero experience, doesn't speak Arabic, zero experience really in the Middle East. And I say, hey, let me introduce you, Jerry, to Pat Lang, Walter Patrick Lang, who established the Arabic program at West Point and taught it there for 2 years. He was the defense attaché to Saudi Arabia and to Yemen. And he was the one that from 1987 to the end of the Iran-Iraq war in 1988 hand-carried U.S. intelligence to the Iraqis, because the Iraqis got mad at the CIA guy whose name was Tom Tweeten, and so they no longer wanted to deal with him. They'd only deal with Pat. So Pat knew more about the Iraqi army than any living, breathing American in government. And I tell Jerry, let me connect you with Pat. And Jerry's response was, no, I don't need to talk to him. I know what I'm doing. That's why I say these ideas that there are plans and strategies and masterminds. I've never seen it. I've seen time and time again where human nature and pettiness and things that just don't make sense become the reason for making decisions. So yeah, I think this is another case where they bet the farm that they kill the top guys, and man, we got the people are going to rise up and they're going to overthrow the government. And it didn't happen. And now they're going, okay, now what? Let's try this. Let's try that. Now we're going to try a blockade.
Well, that's my point from a minute ago, was simply that Trump has oscillated. He's vacillated from, oh, you open that strait immediately, to, oh, it's not a problem. It's your problem, Europe. It's your problem, Gulf states. Screw you guys. Don't need you. To suddenly, why aren't you opening it? I'm going to threaten NATO and the whole thing that's happening now. And now to suddenly, oh, we're just going to blockade it completely ourselves and stop any and all ships.
Yeah.
How's that? Like, you could feel free to comment on that. But the other thing I just want to throw into the mix for your thoughts is, how does this work if it's a Chinese tanker? Is an American warship literally going to seize a Chinese tanker? What the hell is that going to do for Beijing? President Xi Jinping and Trump are meant to be meeting in a month. That's not happening. You're
going to see warnings sent from those capitals of ships are at risk of being captured to back off. And you will see, Russia started doing this. They've started accompanying some of their ships with warships. The Chinese have got some warships in the region, and I wouldn't be surprised to see, if they got a shipment of oil coming out, they'll send a warship to accompany it and dare the United States to attack. And so this is, and let's again, how close in are these U.S. ships? In other words, the farther away from shore they get, the more ships you need to cover. The size of the ocean that needs to be covered expands. And the ocean's a big ass place out there. So that's why I said the United States, right now, they got these two Marine MEU divisions. They can fly a few helicopters here or there, but once these ships start shooting back and say, no, you're not going to board us. You have no right. A couple of them need to get shot down, and we got some more casualties. And then, Trump, he can quote double down, but let's say he wants to send more ships to the area. Great. Takes time. They're not magic. This is not Star Trek. They're not magically transported by a beam me up Scotty machine.
Nice. I like that reference. There's a bit of background noise, which is why I keep muting myself. That for everyone watching. Quick question, just to pause in our great conversation. There is, where's this shirt from? Because this isn't a Hawaiian. This is a different kind of shirt. This is I'm liking the pattern on this one.
What do you mean?
Your shirt. Where is it?
My shirt. Yeah, this is a sort of an Indian Sri Lankan design. So a gift from one of my, people that watch me and say, okay, he doesn't drive me crazy.
That misclick on my part. Sorry, ignore the comment, everyone.
No.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I don't know why. I was trying to, because everyone was asking about your shirt, so I wanted to do a favor to the audience and
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but anyway, so obviously this has spillover effects, a domino effect that we're not even going to begin to imagine. I don't know if you're familiar with game theory and prisoner's dilemma and all that. So one of the concepts that was coming to mind earlier was, I'm fascinated by Nash equilibrium and brinksmanship, because for me, what we're seeing right now, this game is a game of chicken, right? Neither side wants to back out. But in this case, it seems like the Trump administration are more willing to use escalation as leverage to really push the boundaries. Because also, if you think about the teams that were sent into the peace talks, which I want to take a step back and get your thoughts on as well, like the Iranians team looks a little bit more comprehensive. They were there for a genuine discussion, whilst the Americans sent this composition of Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner.
Well, they also said that they sent some 300 other people. I'm thinking, what? Yeah, 300 to do what? But I know that the Iranians sent, they also had a press team to deal with the international press to keep them briefed. And my friend, Professor Marandi, he was there participating in that. And that's sort of ironic because he's an American. People don't know that, but Professor Sayed Mohammed Marandi is a proud man of Virginia. That's where he was born.
Okay, so what about therefore then the peace talks themselves? I don't know if you were paying much attention to that. The United States seemed very maximalist.
Well, it was.
They both were, I guess. How would you interpret it?
Yeah, I think they were wrongly perceived by the media, and as a result, expectations were unduly raised, because Iran presented, what was called a 10-point plan, and most people treated those 10 points like they were items for discussion. That, for example, Iran said all sanctions removed. And so the Western mind's thinking, oh, so they want to talk about, so, okay, maybe we'll do a 50%, or maybe we'll reduce it 70%, or no, that wasn't Iran's position. That was not there as an item to be discussed. They were saying sanctions are going to be lifted. If we're going to have any kind of subsequent negotiations to get towards an agreement of how to end this war, you got to lift those sanctions now, not later, now. That's number one. And you got to stop attacking the people of Lebanon and Hezbollah in particular. That's got to stop now, not in the future, now. And that was, so Iran was very clear on that, and the United States refused to listen to them, because we had our own little agenda. Well, we want the Iranians basically to kiss our ass. That was the U.S. approach. You're going to kiss our ass or else. And the Iranians say, sorry, we brought no chapstick. We're not doing that.
So then what about, a lot of people have been speculating about the role Pakistan had and the background sort of diplomacy that's going on. Do you think that these two are going to continue to talk whilst the military escalation continues? Because we seem to have that in the past.
Do you mean Iran and Pakistan talk?
No, sorry, Iran and America. I was just bringing in because Pakistan's been the Korea.
Again, the United States did itself no favor. If it shows just the inexperience of these negotiators, of Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner. They should have kept the discussion going. Make it Iran the one that walks away. Finally says, no, we can't reach an agreement. We're walking away. It wasn't Iran that walked away. It was the United States. And that sends a message to these other countries that say, hey, there's those Americans again. They not only did they fail to negotiate in good faith before this, but now they're not even willing to sit around and talk and try to reach an agreement. Even try to reach an agreement to not reach an agreement. That they could have come out and said, okay, let's just agree that we don't have an agreement now, but we're going to meet next week to resume our talks. No. The U.S. just broke it off and walked away. And so that elevates Iran's political status within the global community. They weren't the ones who walked away and sabotaged the talks.
Do you think the talks are done?
Yes.
Yeah. But we can't go back to what we've had in the past 6 weeks, can we? I don't think either country has the appetite for that.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be more intense. The United States is going to try. In fact, I think what's going to happen is the United States steps up its attempts to attack Israel or Iran from the air. Iran they now have a more advanced capability to defeat U.S. air operations or cause damage. So you're going to have, the likelihood is you're going to have two or three American pilots in Iranian custody before the end of before the end of April.
Gosh, I'm also hoping, because it means I can have a return to a little bit more of a normal lifestyle. Past 6 weeks of sorry to disappoint you. Yeah, you're gonna have ample things to talk about over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Well, I guess we'll be having to get used to each other. Well, assuming you want to come back on, obviously. But,
sure. No, I enjoy the chat.
No, but okay. So, I mean, the other consideration in this is obviously, actually, I'll save that for later. So let's run with this idea that things worse. get worse. So what does that mean then? Iran is going to activate the Houthis, because there's been debate around whether they're waiting.
Yeah, no, you'll see the Houthis will get, they've been sort of quiet for a while. They'll get re-engaged. The Hezbollah is hurting Israel, despite Israel used to focus on just killing the Muslims, the Shia, but now it's killing Christians too. And so again, that's having the effect of uniting Lebanon behind someone like Hezbollah, who is really putting a hurt on Israel. Israel does not have unlimited resources, and they can launch bombing attacks on Iran. Iran is just too big; they can absorb those blows. Whereas, just think of it. It's like a boxing match between a huge guy that's like 350 pounds, 6'8", and someone who's 4 feet tall and weighs maybe 100 pounds. They can punt. They may be an effective fighter for their weight, but they have a limit. It's much easier for Iran, when it launches ballistic missiles at Israel, to inflict damage on just 2 cities. And that, Tel Aviv and Haifa, the only other big one is Jerusalem. So, if you basically decimate 2/3 of their cities, where 60% of their population lives, compared to, you hurt Tehran, but they're scattered. They've got 91, 92 million people. So you got roughly 10 times the population of Israel, and probably that 10 to 12 times the land size. So it's just if they both maintain the same level of violence, Israel will fall first, not Iran.
One of my favorite, I don't know if he said it verbatim, but one of my favorite insinuations from Trump is that sort of this will be like Venezuela. The naval blockade will be as simple and as successful. It's not. I thought it was always a joke that people were like, "Oh, Trump sort of thinks of Iran like Venezuela," but apparently he actually does. Even though it's not a snatch and grab operation, Venezuela is a little bit of an easier access than Iran. It's geography is destiny, to quote one historian I know. Yeah. Iran's geography is, it's ideal for this situation. And so what does that mean then? The US has to consider even putting boots on the ground again.
Well, again, that in theory, but how does that work out? Let me correct myself. I said, suggested 10 to 15 times larger. No, Iran is 80 times larger physically than Israel. Okay. So just that size differential alone limits the kind of damage that the United States can inflict, and the United States and Israel combined can inflict. And just again, by way of comparison, Iran is at least 1/3, or is that 1/3 or 2/3 larger than Ukraine. Look at all of the firepower Russia has unleashed on Ukraine over the last 4.5 years now. It's an incredible amount. And yet that hasn't caused that society to completely implode, hasn't caused all the industry to collapse, and Iran is a much more decentralized country than is Ukraine. So that's why, people, God, they play too many damn video games without understanding actual size, logistics, time distance issues. So that's why I say if Israel and the United States choose to continue this, the United States is going to run out of weapons that it can use against Iran. It's just a simple matter. You keep using it up and you're not able to produce. Why can't they produce? Because those systems require rare earth minerals that China is telling the United States, go to hell. We're not sending you our rare earth minerals so you can build weapons that you're going to use against us. We're not stupid.
So Okay, but that's one thing, geography. But to be devil's advocate for a second, but it's also about technological capability. Some people would argue that the reason Ukraine has done such a resilient or shown resilience against Moscow is, of course, the funding from several states,
Yeah.
in effect a proxy war, but also because they have been very good at developing, innovating like these drone interceptors and things like that. The reason I'm mentioning this is because people would also emphasize that Israel has a technological advantage to Iran. You wouldn't agree?
What would that be? Because Iran's created at least a couple of variants of hypersonic missiles. Israel has not. So what would that technological advantage be?
Well, have the Iranians tested that? I'm not aware of hypersonics being used by them.
Oh yeah, I tested it. They demonstrated it.
When?
In the course of the first demonstration was October 2024, and you saw this missile comes down and it deviates. It's against an air defense system. Oh no, absolutely. Iranian technology on that. In fact, Iranian technology on drones far advanced over that of Israel. Israel's more along the lines of the United States. They like to build these big, the big drones that can, launch like a Hellfire missile, but they cost, $35 million. Actually, did you see? I was shocked to learn this. There is a new drone that the United States has deployed. It's called the Opticon. Cost of that, I couldn't believe the number. $200 million for one drone, and it got shot down the other day.
Well, this is the thing. This is what's changed, especially since the war in Ukraine, isn't it? The use of large, heavy, industrial, complex military equipment, bombers, and all that. You don't necessarily need it. Nation states can do a lot with very little. I lived in Africa for a few years. I worked on Ethiopia during the civil war there in the past few years, and what we saw with the federal government was that they leveraged drones in a way that it decimated the TPLF or the communist opposition party, the one that wanted a separatist movement for Tigray, the province. The reason I mentioned it, that was just a staunch example of where drones, and that was getting stuff from UAE, Ukraine. Right. So even Ukraine's attacks on Russian industry has been quite notable. So, what does this tell us about the capabilities of Iran that we don't know? Because if they do have hypersonics, let alone drones, why haven't they used them more against Israel?
They have been. The problem we have is Israel has imposed strict censorship that you don't know exactly what's being hit, and even they've restricted China satellite companies that have satellites, commercial satellites, from taking any images over Israel. I mean, think about that. If Israel is really kicking ass and taking names, man, and wasn't taking any damage, they'd say, hey, come in, take a look. They're not laying a glove on us. Iran sucks. They're not doing that. They're covering it up because Iran is taking a big piece of their ass and will continue to do so. It's just like, let's draw the parallel with Ukraine and Russia. Now for the last 16 months, Ukraine and Russia have been exchanging the bodies of dead prisoners. And what has happened over those 16 months is every month, roughly 1,000 dead Ukrainians are returned to Ukraine by Russia. And in turn, Ukraine turns over 31 dead, 40 dead, 27 dead. I mean, the ratios are just, it's roughly about a 30-to-1 ratio. Now, the defenders of Ukraine argue, well, that's just because the Russians are advancing so fast that the Ukrainians don't have time to pick up the bodies. Hell, how about that, huh? I thought Russia was losing and just creeping along so slowly that it wasn't making any progress. So, this is, the numbers are what the numbers are. So it just shows you the disproportionate casualties being suffered by Ukraine. Okay, so we get the same thing that's taking place now with between Israel and Iran. Fortunately, in this now 44-day war, it will be. We're starting. This is the start of week 7. That Iran has not suffered massive casualties. That's the good news. Have they suffered some significant damage to infrastructure? Sure. Irreparable? No. Israel is in a much weaker position simply by virtue of its small size, because it's much easier to damage, to damage one power plant, which actually provides, let's say, 80% of the power to the entire country, as opposed to in Iran, you damage one power plant, you affect 5% of the country. It's just that kind of difference. So that is why the United States was desperate to get talks going with Iran, because it was hurting the West, both economically and militarily, because one of Iran's demands was to get the U.S. military out of the Gulf states. Well, guess what? They're achieving that without the cooperation of the United States, because they're doing it organically. They're just blowing up their bases and forcing the U.S., compelling U.S. forces to retreat.
Compelling case there. I mean, the difference, I think, drawing the parallels between Ukraine and Russia and Israel, Iran, there's a lot of overlap between the two wars now, isn't there? They've really become intertwined with the Iranians' provision of the Shaheeds. The Russians quickly reverse engineered and I think have refined the whole situation. But
let me pause you there for a second. Just a question. Do you know where the Shaheeds came from?
Iran.
No.
Where did they come from?
United States.
Well, then why aren't the Americans using their own cheap ass?
There you go, asking a logical question, thinking that we're a logical, thoughtful people. No, back in 2012, Iran brought down a drone that it was this triangle shape, the whole thing. They brought it down, reverse engineered it, and then began producing it. So they produced the Shaheed, sent it to the Russians. Russians upgraded it to the Iran. They've made some improvements on it. They've sent it back to the Iranians. But the original one that was behind it was the CIA. Hilarious.
So why was it that when Russian equipment was deconstructed, it had American and Western electronics in it?
Yeah.
So we're all just stealing from one another. Is that
sure? It's global.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. But okay, I guess my curiosity though is where do you think Europe fits into this? We've just had the remarkable election in Hungary. Orban's on the way out. Do you think Europe's going to make any moves to try and help with the Strait of Hormuz? Are we going to see Europe relevant at all?
Yeah, Europe's irrelevant. I mean, they're irrelevant.
It hurts to hear you say that. As
what great resources do they have?
Well, 400 billion in defense spending. It's not nothing.
But it's an incoherent defense spending. It's split up where France buys French stuff, Germans buy German stuff, Brits buy British stuff. Some of the equipment integrates, some of it doesn't. They're not a coherent whole. They're irrelevant. They used to be relevant. Europe was the center of scientific research at one point. It was the birthplace of modern industry. But it's lost its mojo on all those fronts. So
yeah, I'm more bullish on Europe, but perhaps that's because I want the best for the continent. I certainly think in the Middle East it's not much of a player. What I do think would be interesting, which is why I mentioned about the Houthis to you earlier, is because if the Houthis decide to block the Gulf of Aden, that would obviously require the Europeans to respond, because that would be a huge problem for Egypt and the Suez. So I'm just curious, how much of a domino effect could this have? And then you actually see the Europeans getting involved.
Well, they've already, to my knowledge, the Houthis didn't open up freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. They're still restricting which ships, if any ships connected with Israel, it doesn't get to doesn't pass through there. And I think several of the major shipping companies, they decided long ago that it was the insurance costs and risks weren't worth it, so they're just doing the extended trip down around the Horn of Africa. So the Houthis, the Houthis can be more. They're not a decisive factor in any dust up with Israel. They're more of a nuisance, harassment. Something else just forces Israel to divert some of its forces. But the big games with Hezbollah.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you next about a little bit. The situation with Lebanon seems to have reached a bit of a plateau at the moment. The Israelis, the Lebanese are talking, but as we know from the past 24, 48 hours, it doesn't really mean anything. Just because you start talking doesn't guarantee anything. So what do you think the situation there would be with the direction of Lebanon?
Well, I think Israel will probably be able to sustain its offensive for another 2 weeks, and then they'll find a way to retreat, just like they did back in 2006. The losses, Israel cannot sustain the kind of losses they're taking with tanks and armored vehicles that they are right now. And Hezbollah has upgraded its capabilities. Before they were using anti-tank missiles, some of which, I'm sure they've obtained from the United States, courtesy of Ukraine. So you've got some of that on the battlefield, I'm sure. But they've now got drones, fiber optic drones, that they are using with great effect to attack and destroy tanks. You destroy the treads, and then you go after the crew compartment. And the report is it's more than 100 Merkava tanks. I'm not sure what the total number was in inventory for the Israelis, but that's a significant loss.
No, I feel very saddened by the situation for Lebanon. I think we were talking about it a few days back, right? Relative to the proportion of the population, it's I think the death toll is now 2,200, which is insanely high, just period. If I can ask you a little bit more about the nuclear element, because this seemed to be the sticking point for the Americans. Apparently, the Iranians weren't willing to discuss enrichment, access to, and it takes us back to whether we're just going to see a rewritten version of the JCPOA. Right? Do you think that's where we're just going to go?
Yeah. I think if there is a negotiated settlement, it would be along the lines of the JCPOA. With this, the big difference would be, and this is how Trump could claim the ultimate victory, the face saving, is, unlike that old JCPOA, which was just constrained, it was only 10 years. We've got a permanent solution. This thing is in place forever. And so Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. We've got that guarantee, and they could get that agreement. Iran would make that deal. Iran would make it but it would provision that it would continue to be able to enrich uranium for medical purposes and research purposes and energy. But they would accept inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they would remain as signatories to the NPT. I think to get a full guarantee for the United States that includes lifting of all the sanctions and Iran retaining sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, there's some things the U.S. would have to swallow. But, Trump's capable, or his team's capable of spending it that, hey, we've got a permanent solution. Iran will never, ever have a nuclear weapon.
But this is what I find bizarre, right? I'm just checking the updates here to see, and it's like you've got the Russians quoting the Iranians, emphasizing that a deal with the US is, quote, not out of reach. Right. Which sounds more reasonable than Trump's zero-sum game of they will give us everything we want, right? This complete and utter unwillingness by the Trump administration to show any give at all. I don't understand where they're attempting to think that the Iranians will be. If the Americans aren't willing to compromise, then Tehran won't be either. Especially around.
It's all part of that art of the deal. I mean, that's how Trump negotiates. You know, these ultimatums, these extreme positions. But you know, it's wearing a little thin on people. I know it is on me. But the Iranians went into this. Went into this with their eyes open. They knew what they were dealing with, that it was a treacherous group, and not to be trusted. But again, if you look, you know, I look past the substance of what was being said to, let's call it the optics of it, and the optics are this: it's the United States that walks away first, not the Iranians, and that sends a big message to the rest of the world.
Well, there's a joke going around that, you know, Vance visited the Pope, he passes away, he went to Orban, he loses the election, he attended the negotiations, and the US left. So maybe it's just the Vance effect, or opposite.
Well, they called that I thought Zelensky. They called that also the Zelensky effect.
Yeah, I've heard that one as well. On the
the other side. JD Vance is developing a meme for himself.
I don't really understand his game, if I'm honest with you, because I thought he was staying out of this because he didn't want to jeopardize his association with the MAGA movement and then running on it, you know, in 28. But it seems to be he's now fully inserted himself into the equation. And so when the government is, you know, inevitably reprimanded in the midterms, that's going to affect MAGA post-Trump, isn't it?
Well, I've listened. You know, I know that Robert Barnes has been had a pretty good relationship with JD, and he's been able to provide some insights into, you know, JD is trying to navigate very treacherous waters. You know, if I was Vance, I would have a third party, you know, a trusted third party, to start going around and talking to different members of the cabinet and key members of the Senate and the House, both Republican and Democrat, to take the temperature about is there support to do a 25th Amendment. I really think we're at a stage where Trump has got to be removed from office because he is under such control and threat of the Zionist crowd that he has no room to operate. You know, I think there may be enough Republicans that might suddenly decide to sign up for something like that, because after they go home from their, you know, they've been out on vacation, when they get back to Congress, they're going to recognize they're going to get slaughtered in the fall. That they're not feeling good at all about their chances of staying in office. And those guys want to stay in, guys and gals want to stay in office because there's money to be had. So that will be Vance's only hope of survival. If the Democrats take over the House and Senate, I think it's widely expected that they would initiate impeachment proceedings against Trump. I'm suggesting an alternative, that they will go out, they'll impeach Kash Patel if he's still around, Hegseth if he's still around, you know, the lower level cabinet folks, Howard Lutnick, but they'll leave Trump in office because he's so bad that he's a great foil to run against in 2028. Because the last thing they want to do, if they remove Trump from office and JD Vance goes in and proves to be somewhat competent, you know, Vance might be able to turn the thing around. And I don't think they want to take that chance but again, they may conclude now Vance is a joke. He's so weakened. So, you know, it doesn't matter if he gets in or not. So, but, you know, all of this is, we're looking at a future for the United States that's chaotic. That is not normal.
Can it get any worse than it currently is?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Look, I learned long back in 1979 with the fall, fall of the Shah. And I remember saying to someone, "Oh, this can't get any worse." Oh, yes, it can.
Yeah.
Yes, it can.
Well, okay. Well, Larry, I mean, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I guess my last question, or open-ended as usual, is simply, what would you encourage our viewers, listeners to look out for? I mean, we only spoke 2-3 days ago, but I'm almost feeling like this is a weekly thing at this point, which is good fun. But yeah, anything to look out for in the next week?
Yeah, this the ramp up of the war. The war will be back on with full force, probably by within the next 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then if the United States follows through on this threat that they're going to enforce an embargo, if those ships get within 200 miles of Iran's shore, they'll be attacked, and I think we'll see one vessel sunk or maybe more.
Well, yeah, I'll leave it on the cliffhanger that the blockade will begin at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's 3 o'clock my time. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But the CENTCOM has said that the blockade will be enforced, quote, impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas. It includes all Iranian ports in the Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, but it will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels simply transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from Iranian ports. So that seems like already a bit of a walk back, or a sort of a U-turn or a taco, right?
Yeah.
They're already trying to clarify their position.
I don't know what the level of damage to the infrastructure in UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. Like the pumping of oil, the aluminum production. I do understand that is dead, and that's not coming back for at least 2 years, because the machinery required to run it and operate, it's not available. It takes that long to get something like that built. So we shall see. It's going to be a mess for a long while.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll just have to have you back, won't we? Everyone watching, thank you so much. Do give the video a like. Do subscribe to make sure you see us back and forthing with Larry, because I like the banter. It's great forth with you, Larry, and always a pleasure to hear your insights. And everyone watching, thanks so much. Have a good evening. Stay safe. And hopefully, well, I don't like to say it, Larry, but hopefully you're wrong and there isn't a war tomorrow.
Listen, I pray to God I'm wrong. I wish I was wrong. I would love to be wrong on this. Absolutely. That there's no ego. This is not like, oh, I was right. But it's like, when I told Mario, it was sort of, he's a good kid. And look, I get to call you guys kids because I'm 71 years old.
I'm younger than Mario. I thought I was older, but he's I think he's in his mid-30s. I'm 32. So
yeah. So
I'm the youngest.
You're a kid. You could almost be. You could almost. My son is 43. Okay, so. But
I appreciate that about you. You come and you give us some great experience and perspectives, and you give me an opportunity to back and forth with you as well. Yeah. And I think that's part of the conversation, right?
I mean, this, at least I think I understand it. Donald Trump doesn't. He thinks being on television, like cable news, that's a big deal. What you're doing, what Mario's doing, the social media, that's the future. That's where the information's coming from. And now, is it a little bit of a Wild West out there? Yeah, but it is. Listen, it is. I so much prefer this format compared to, I used to be a TV talking head, and you'd spend 3 hours just to get on TV for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I'm entering that phase at the moment. I've had some opportunities, and it's so difficult to get any sense of what you want to say. You've got 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 2 minutes 58. It's insane, especially if they ask you in studio. I had my first opportunity like 3 weeks ago, and that was crazy. But anyway, thank you very much, Larry. It's always a pleasure.
All right, my friend. We'll see you. Talk to you next week.